Okay, thank you very much. It's been a delight to be here and had wonderful meetings today that have caused me to think a lot about my talk. So if I seem a bit puzzled at times as I'm speaking, it's because the wonderful questions that people have asked throughout the day, yesterday and today, have sort of caused me to think different things. So also just a quick note for those of you who are more excited about the Google autonomous car or Google glasses or work with robots than this talk, I'm happy to answer questions about those as well. But this talk is not about those. This talk is about multitasking and particularly the issues of chronic distraction and how that affects belonging. Because of the nature of the topic, the first half of the talk isn't going to talk about belonging. It's going to talk about chronic distraction because I think that's where it's important to have a grounding in that before we turn to the issues of how that affects belonging. I will also say in advance, I'm going to use this forum. Partly I'll be talking about published and unpublished studies, but also I want to take some time to be a little more speculative and a little more broad in some of my claims because I think they are important and interesting and fit well with the topic of the day. This area is very new. The first paper on chronic distraction came out in 2010, so I think it's important to set out some broader issues today. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is multitasking, particularly media multitasking. So I'm not going to be talking about things like, can you walk and juggle and breathe and chew gum at the same time? We're going to talk about consumption of media. And what we mean by multitasking in this context is exposure to and use of unrelated information content. There's a totally different psychology of related information content. What do I mean? So for example, if you're doing a paper on Abraham Lincoln and you have pictures of Abraham Lincoln and speeches of Abraham Lincoln and the materials of Abraham Lincoln up on the screen, that's not multitasking because you're really trying to do one task, namely write a paper about Abraham Lincoln. If, on the other hand, as is so common among college students, you're writing a paper on Abraham Lincoln, you have a couple of chat windows going, you have Facebook up, you have a YouTube video or two running on the screen, and maybe there's music going on. There's usually almost always music going on if you're a college student, and there's also a television in the background. That's multitasking because none of those things are related to each other. Okay, how common is this? The average college student, based on surveys we've done, uses stream media simultaneously whenever they are using media. And for high multitaskers, top 25%, 4 or more media. That means every time you sit down to use a medium, be it use, text someone, be it Facebook, be it to write a paper, do a math problem, etc. If you're in the top 25% of the population using 4 or more media at one time, and we have people as much as 7 or 8 chronically doing that. Low multitaskers are 1.8 or less, bottom 25%. So there's a wide spread, right? There are people who are just consuming all sorts of media all the time, and a bunch of people who are really focused. And often when I talk about this, people will often apologize to me and say, oh, I can only do one thing. I really can't have all these things going on. And as we'll see, there's no need for them to apologize. They should be proud and happy about it. If we go to a younger age group, tween girls, these are 8 to 12-year-old girls. We don't have data on boys currently, although the evidence is likely that boys are higher. They tend to show in this age group especially more media use. They use 2.25 media simultaneously, so the average tween is multitasking at least a little bit, and high multitaskers are 3 or more, and 1.6 or less for the low. Okay, so we have these younger age groups. What about adults? We see growing expectation of multitasking in the workplace. Okay, enormous pressure to do so. So there are many companies that have rules. Chat windows must be open for all team members. Okay, well, what does that mean? That means any team member can write you about anything anytime they want, and you're expected to read it and respond. Since they don't know what you're working on, they're asking about their own problems, you're being forced to multitask. Rules that say respond to email within XX minutes means that you have to drop whatever you're doing and switch to doing email. I hear from a lot of companies, just-in-time information is king. Okay, so what does that mean? That means everyone in the company should help me to give me my information when I need it. Okay, so that works well for me, but if I send out an email to 50 people saying, please answer this question, I love it. If everyone races to answer that question, stops what they're doing, races to answer the question, sends me the answer really quickly, I go, boy, this just-in-time stuff is great. However, when the other 49 people do it, I'm distracting myself. So I'm living in a world of chronic distraction with some teeny payoff to me. Okay? Then the whole spirit of don't keep colleagues waiting. These are all things that are happening in the workforce, driving multitasking in older age groups as well. Okay. We're also seeing a growth in media use during conversation. So sitting at the dinner table, we see more and more people working on some device, be it a tablet or a phone or something, while they're chatting at dinner. So the old idea that, if families get together at dinner every day, it's great for the kids, okay, only works if, in fact, people are looking and talking with each other, because it's not the wood of the table that creates this magical good thing of people eating together at dinner. So this idea of media use during conversation is growing, and it will have, and I believe it has, significant negative effects. Okay, now, if you're willing to accept with me, and I think it's pretty well accepted, that multitasking has grown. It's just growing. We could ask the question, why? Is it those crazy teenagers doing something else strange and funny? Is it some fad that drives this? Is it, some conspiracy of Apple and Google and Microsoft to sell more of whatever it is they're selling? Well, I don't think that's the key story. Those all may be part of it. But the real story is actually a story that we can date back at least to the 1880s, which is something called the partial displacement discovery. It's probably the single most important, I think, discovery in the field of communication for 21st century media. And what is a partial displacement idea? It's usually called partial displacement theory, but the evidence is actually extremely strong. Since we have data for this, which goes back to about the mid to late 1800s, we know that every time a new information, product, or service appears, the first thing that happens won't surprise you at all. It steals time from other media activities. So, film took time from reading, radio took time from film, television took time from radio, internet takes time from television, etc. So that's quite logical. If I give you a new media activity, it's quite reasonable that the first thing you would do is use it to displace other media activities. But the magic of media is that media doesn't just steal time from other media activities. For reasons we don't fully understand, every time a new media activity appears, it steals time from non-media activities as well. This is why the amount of time spent with media across all age groups has grown steadily since the 1880s, almost year-over-year growth. Every year, more and more media being consumed, across age groups all the time. Now, let's just picture what's happening. Here's my calendar, typical day planner, right? It goes from whatever time in the morning, let's say 7 in the morning to 11 at night. And let's say that this amount of time, these parts of the day were spent on media, and these parts of the day were spent on non-media, okay? New media product and services appear. They start stealing more and more time for non-media activities, more and more time for non-media activities, okay, more and more time. And eventually, I run out of time to steal. I literally can't steal any more time. The few things I can't do while I'm using media, right, or it becomes extremely difficult to do so, and I run out of time to steal. So you might have imagined that at that moment in history, we'd reach a point where we go, okay, no more time to steal from other media, therefore, no more time to steal from non-media, we give up. So we're not going to create more information products and services. That didn't happen at all, just the opposite. There's acceleration of new media products and services, right? New iPhone apps every day, new software, new stuff all the time. New technologies, mobility, more screens, higher quality screens. We can see more stuff, all this stuff happening. So we didn't stop making new media. In fact, just the opposite. You could have imagined we said, we give up. No more will we do this. We will only transfer time from other media activities. That would mean media use won't keep growing. Didn't do that. Media use has been steadily growing. So there was only one alternative left. Double and triple booking. Parallel media use. So the engine that has driven multitasking has been essentially an engine that's always existed, which is the desire for every new medium not to merely replace old media time. But when we ran out, instead of just giving up, we started stealing in parallel. We started double and triple booking because our calendars were too full. Once we had that idea that we could double and triple book media, or as you saw, quadruple book media for the top 25%, all the time, we got the idea we can propagate as many media activities as we want. We can fill our lives with simultaneous media consumption. That's the engine of media multitasking, and that's why we don't think it's a fad. We think this is going to continue. Okay, So, what are the effects of double and triple booking media? Well, the short-term effects to me are obvious. It should be pretty obvious to everyone. There's tons of research that shows this, so it has been documented, that if you use multiple media at one time, it's going to make it harder to process what you're doing. So, classic study of Patricia Greenfield down at UCLA showed that the little runner of text at the bottom of the CNN screen, or ESPN does this, all the sports networks do, distract you. Now, how could it be otherwise? You're reading something, somebody's talking about something else, of course it's going to distract you. I mean, I'm glad the research is done, there's been a lot of it, but it's sort of obvious, right? You can't have all these stuff going on and not have an effect. Any classic distraction task. Fields of psychology, communication, etc. is filled with tasks where if you distract people, you'll be shocked to learn they don't do as well. Okay? So it doesn't seem very exciting. I mean, it's important to know and it's totally believable. But what we wanted to do was ask the question, not does that happen? What the focus of this research is on is chronic multitasking. What happens when you multitask all the time? That is, you use 4 media or more at once whenever you use media. Does that change the way you think, and does that change the way you feel? So I'll first talk about the way you think, then I'll talk about the way you feel. Okay? So, I live in a freshman dorm at Stanford, and I asked the students in the dorm, I saw them multitasking all the time, and I said to them, hey, this surely is impeding your performance, this is terrible, perhaps you shouldn't do it. And they said to me, do not worry. Why shouldn't I worry, I asked. They said, when it really matters, I don't multitask. So they said, sure, I got all stuff up. When I got a really hard math problem, I turn off Facebook and chat. When I really care about something, I make sure to focus, etc., so I'm fine. Okay. But are they fine? Do they pay for their chronic multitasking? Then another one I heard a lot of was, multitasking doesn't bother me because I do it so often. I'm so practiced at multitasking that it doesn't bother me. Think of the analogies to other activities, like I, smoke so frequently, cigarettes don't bother me. Or, et cetera, or I eat so often that obesity is obviously not a problem for me because I just do it all the time. In fact, the more I do it, the less of a problem it is, right? So this seems an odd argument, but could be. There's certainly other activities where if you get used to them, certainly if you exercise a lot, you don't get as sore if you do the same amount, etc. So maybe it's plausible. And then my favorite, as I get older, and they stay the same age, freshmen stay 18, I get older, young brains, unlike you, Professor Nass, are able to multitask. You, with your ever-aging brain, cannot. Okay. So this, needless to say, bothered me, and I decided to understand if they could multitask, I said, you must be good at this. What can you do? Could I steal something that you do? Could I learn to do what you do so that I too could multitask and lead the happy lives you lead? Okay, so how do we measure multitasking so we can talk about high and low multitaskers? There's no perfect way to do it. We've been fiddling a lot with our measures, but here's roughly what we do. We ask people in a questionnaire. It's all questionnaire-based. We don't, unfortunately, don't have activity measures. There are ways to do it with, I got a mental block in the name, pinging at random times during the day and saying whether you're doing media or not. But basically what we do is we say on an average day, how many hours do you use media X? And we list a bunch of media. This isn't the definitive list. We don't have a definitive list, sort of frustrating. We use different sets depending on the population, but it's not a bad list. It includes most things. Maybe the categories aren't perfect, but we basically ask that question first so we get general media use measures, and then the critical media multitasking part is we say on an average day, while Xing, while doing one of these activities, how often are you doing the following other activities at the same time? That's what multitasking is. So what we do is for each of these, after we ask the question, how many hours do you use Medium X, we then say, while you're using Media X, how often are you doing them, and reproduce the same list again. And we allow for people doing multiple chat sessions, etc. Again, not perfect, but it's a pretty decent measure that seems to be pretty reliable, pretty stable, and seems to do a pretty good job of distinguishing high multitaskers from low, at least when you look at the quartiles. I'm not so confident about how well it's doing on the middle, but we're only looking at the quartiles, so we're okay. All right? So that's the idea. We're just saying, how often do you do it? Okay. So we now take the people who score in the top quartile for their population group, college students, tweens, etc. We then take the lower quartile, lower 25%, and we focus on two categories of activity. So we first focused on cognitive function. A lot of this work was done with Anthony Wagner, a professor at Stanford, and Eyal Ophir, who was an undergraduate and then a master's student. We first did a bunch of studies on the issue of can high chronic multitaskers focus on the relevant when they have to or when they want to, okay? And second one is we looked at task switching, because after all, if multitasking is anything, it probably involves switching from one task to another. So what happens? So I'm going to show you the first task. This is a modification of a task created by Vogel, and it seems very simple. You will see a group of rectangles twice. I want you to ignore the blue rectangles. So I am giving you the simplest, one of the simplest focus tasks there is, which is to say, pay attention to this, don't pay attention to that. I want you to only remember the red rectangles. And to make it easy for you, there are only going to be two red rectangles. There may be a bunch of blue rectangles, but you can ignore them anyway. Two red rectangles, and you're going to see two pictures of them. I want to know if one of the, and to make it even easier, all the rectangles are staying in the same place. The only difference is one of the red rectangles may or may not change orientation, may or may not rotate. And all I want to know is if the red rectangle rotates or not. Does that make sense to everybody? Only two red rectangles, ignore the blue. We're going to see if one of them changed orientation. Okay, so you see this for 200 milliseconds, you see this for 100 milliseconds, you then see this for 900 milliseconds, and then for 2,000 milliseconds you see this. How many of you think the rectangle rotated? Very good. The vast majority of you, and you are right. A red rectangle rotated. That's excellent. So let's see what happened. Here are the results. The squares, so let's look at the squares first, the dashed line with the squares. Those are the low multitaskers. And what we see basically, and the x-axis is the number of distractors, and this is their performance, their performance. And what do we see? For the high multitasker, for the low multitaskers, the people who never, don't multitask, the blue rectangles don't mess them up. There's basically no difference in their performance, 0, 2, 4, or 6 blue rectangles. But what do we see for the high multitaskers? As the number of distractors increases, they do worse and worse. Now think about that. What could have been easier for them? We told them exactly what they had to pay attention to. They knew there were only two of them. They told them exactly to ignore the blue, and yet the more blue, the worse they did, and they start swimming. They start getting lost, okay? So what they're doing is, so what does this mean? What it says is they're not filtering out, at least one account, and we'll show you other evidence that suggests this, they're not filtering out the blue rectangles. They're taking them in, thinking about them, even though they know they shouldn't. Okay, let's talk about some more tasks. Another task was a series of letters task. It's called the AXCPT task. We give people a series of letters. There are only 4 letters, A, B, X, and Y. So we just say letter, 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 letter. And we say to you, click yes only when you see A followed by X, right immediately after. So if you see AX, click. If you see ABX, do not click. If you see BY, do not click. If you see BX, do not click. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so we do that. Pretty darn easy task. And in fact, we don't see any difference in accuracy or speed between the high and low multitaskers. Okay, fine. But what happens when we add in some letters of a different color, which we say to ignore? We say if you see a red letter, so we have red letters as well as the normal black against white, we say just ignore them, they don't count. If you see AX with a Y in between that's red, ignore it. If you see a red X, ignore it, etc. Okay, again, almost in some ways an easier task. What happens? The high multitaskers are much slower. The minute we give them something to ignore, they slow down. Okay? Then, noticing the irrelevant, this is a task, probably most of you have seen it in Psych 1. It's a famous task of people throwing a basketball back and forth, and a gorilla walks by. Most of you are nodding. If you haven't, you can find it on the web. Just put gorilla inattention blindness or just gorilla basketball. Any of those will find it. Okay? Basically what happens is we tell people, so what do we do in this task? We tell people, count the number of times the players in white pass a basketball back and forth. There are people in white and people in black. They do it, and halfway through the video, a guy in a gorilla suit literally walks across, doesn't like run across, literally walks across, beats his chest, and walks the other side. Remarkably, very cool finding, very important. Dan Simon found that about half of all people don't see the gorilla. And it blows people away, and they're all excited, okay? So we did this study, and it turned out that the high multitaskers see the gorilla. So I thought, wow, these high multitaskers have an advantage after seemingly they're bad at filtering. But they count the number of passes wrong. So we ask them to do one thing, count the number of passes, they screw it up. The low multitaskers count the number of passes. They may not see the gorilla, but they actually focus on what they have to do, which belies the argument that they can focus when they want to. So high multitaskers see distraction at the cost of focus. And finally, we did the 3-back task, which is a task where, again, I tell you a series of letters, and I tell you that I want you to say yes if you saw the exact same letter exactly 3 letters ago. So that goes like this. If I say A, B, A, you don't say yes, because the A was only 2 letters ago, right? We'll start again. A, B, C, D, B. Yes, right? Exactly 3 letters. Turns out there's a great test of working memory, management of working memory, because if you can think of it, you're putting letters in and out. Does that make sense? You're putting a letter in, then you got to take it out, but you got to file it back in at the right time. Okay, so what happens? It turns out that the high multitaskers do worse, but they do worse in a very interesting way. The more they see a letter, the more they think they saw it 3 letters ago, and the longer the task goes on, the worse they do. So basically, there's an account that says they're sticking these letters in, they don't want to let them go. They just keep on stuffing them in, okay? So there's some evidence that on average, they don't have less broad memory capacity. So what it suggests is they just sort of are very sloppy, which is the exact opposite of what I expected. I expected the only way these people survive as multitaskers is by being incredibly good at filtering in some way or another, or managing memory. So it was quite striking that they do bad on all these tasks, okay? Belying the fact that they told me when I have to focus, I can focus. So what does it say? It says high multitaskers are suckers for distraction. They let distractions into their memory, they're casual about where they look, and they hang on to them, okay? And there's suggestive evidence that there's no difference in net attention. Now that's a tough measure, it's an extremely hard thing to measure, it's really only suggestive at this point, but it's not that under some definitions of attention, in other words, they're seeing the gorilla. They're attending to something, just not what they're supposed to attend to. So this notion of, are they really lacking attention, is a problematic one. Now, this is a really tough one. That's why Mark is suggestive. We don't really have a great account for what does it mean to pay attention, to have this broad notion of attention. We tend to look at attention as a primary focus. And I'll talk later about how that may be problematic in the 21st century. Okay, now let's go to the next activity, which is switching from one task to another. Because you think about multitasking, if there's one thing they should be good at is switching tasks. After all, that would be something you would expect they would be good at, and what happens. So in this case, I'll show you the task they use, one of the tests we use. This is a test of switching just between 2 tasks, not 27, not 4 or more, 2. Okay, so what's going to happen is you're going to see the word letter or the word number, followed by a letter-number pair, like 2B. If you see the word letter, I want you to say yes if it's a vowel and no if it's a consonant. If you see the word number, I want you to say yes if it's even and no if it's odd. Does that make sense? So the thing you see first will tell you what to do with the thing you see second. So let's try the first one. So it says number, and it's 4A. Hopefully you would say yes, very good. But this one was easy, because even though it said letter, I think it said letter. See, I'm not paying attention. It said number, sorry. You would have said yes if it's a 4, but you would also say yes if it was, you looked at the A. But we make it harder. We don't just make it easy. So now it says number here, but now we switch to letter. That's a switch, right? And now switching what you should look at, and I say 6C, and you would say no, because it's a consonant, right? It says letter. So no if it's a consonant, And so you would say no. If you were looking at the number, you would mess up, right? And that's one thing that could happen. And then we go to letter again, and then we say E9, and you would say yes. And now we cleverly switch back to number, another switch, okay? And 8P, and you would say yes, right? Because it's, okay. So you can imagine we vary the number of letter, letter, and we look for whether there's a difference in what's called the switch cost. All humans, or in general, humans tend to have a switch cost. That is, we can't just immediately stop on a dime, go from number to letter. We have some penalty there. But the high multitaskers had much greater switch costs. It took them much longer. Now remember, these are multitaskers, the dudes who do this all the time, not the people who don't do it. The people who do it all the time, constantly switching, nonetheless, they had much higher switch costs. And they were even slower in the non-switch trials, especially as the task goes on. So basically, they just get in a sea. They just get in a mess. They just become confused. It's not a general reaction time effect. The reaction times in general are fine. It's really an issue of they just get messed up. They can't keep things clean and clear, which is exactly what you would have thought the only way to survive as a multitasker. So what we've seen here is in all the ways it would be good to be a multitasker, they're bad. Okay? So then we started asking, what's going on here? So we have two different types of evidence for this. One is the survey results we did. And one thing that turns out is if you ask people, high multitaskers like to switch tasks. They enjoy it. So when you ask them, compared to low multitaskers, do you like keeping on the same activity or switching? High multitaskers like to switch. They're well aware that they are switching a lot. They enjoy it. We then decided to look for personality differences. And one we found was, if you look at the classic 5-dimension personality model, there's one dimension where high multitaskers are much lower than low, and that is conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is a measure of, do you like to complete tasks? Do you like to finish things? Do you like to sort of make sure things are done? The high multitaskers don't. Their view of the world is one of where they really don't value at some fundamental level completion, finishing. They like to switch. They don't like to go in deep and focus. Okay, so high multitaskers are not just suckers for distraction, they're suckers for switching, which means they're actually, in fact, bad at multitasking. And it's suggestive, along with the other evidence, that they activate, but they don't deactivate. Okay, the combination of the interference of the earlier tasks along with this. And they do not focus. They're just not a group that really likes to attend. Okay, so I've now given you this image of what is a growing part of the population, okay? Because a growing number of people are multitaskers now, right? Now, you can think about some implications of this for driving, for example. How good is it if you're a driver and like to be distracted? Okay, so in general, it's bad. The one case where we found where it was actually better, or not good but better, was we did a study of people using the cell phone while driving. It's bad for everyone, harms everyone's performance, don't do it. But we found, oddly enough, that high multitaskers were better drivers while on the cell phone than low multitaskers. And we decided to understand why. And the answer is because when people are using a cell phone while driving, their primary focus is the phone call. So low multitaskers, being responsible people, focused on the phone call and had much better phone conversations. Okay? The high multitaskers were distracted by this weird thing called the road, which represented this really engaging distraction. So while they didn't really want to focus on the phone, they could look at this other thing. There's some lines, there's some cars and stuff that engage them more than the low multitaskers. So they're suckers for distraction, even when, so in some sense it's a good thing, right, that they're distracted into watching the road. But it is an interesting problem that they're just always distracted. They're just always looking for a distraction. And they will find it. And if they find it, they love it. Okay? So, all right, so So that's a cognitive account. That's a story of how these guys view the world. Okay? So now I want to talk about, if you view the world that way, what might be the consequences for your social and emotional life? This is about belonging and stuff. What might happen if you're constantly distracted, you don't really focus very well, you're constantly switching tasks, nothing really becomes a primary focus of your attention, etc. So, this first study we did was grounded in the idea that emotional learning requires attention. That even though human brains are built in some sense to observe faces and voices, we have a lot of activity in those regions, we're good at that. At the same time, I don't think that we're fully inborn the way, let's say, birds, or certain birds, not all birds, are built with their bird songs inborn. I don't believe that people are inborn with the knowledge of all the different emotions, the complexities of emotions, etc. Of course, they're inborn with reaction to emotion to some degree, but it takes some learning, okay? Emotions are hard because, for example, emotions can change in seconds or even pieces of seconds. There are paralinguistic cues. So in language, when we speak, we of course transmit the words, but we also transmit emotion through how we speak. We also transmit trait information, of course, like male or female or age, but we transmit through our voice our emotions. So you can listen to someone, they can say, I'm fine. Or if they go, I'm fine, that's telling you that there's something up through paralinguistic cues. Facial cues, it's pretty obvious that faces transmit emotion, but you'll be shocked to learn, if I'm looking at my screen while I'm talking with you, I don't see your face. So no matter how much emotion you're transmitting, I'm not receiving. Okay? Similarly with body posture, harder to read, but still part of something we do. Hard to, if you don't use your eyes, if your eyes are occupied, you can't see it. Emotion also can be hard because you have to distinguish personality from emotion. It takes attention to do that. And finally, emotion requires thinking. You have to think hard about emotions. So, emotion learning also requires the ability to manage distraction and to try to either task switch or try to avoid task switching. So, for example, there are a few conversations in isolated environments. So right now, in addition to looking at me and the screen, which I hope you're doing, there's zillions of things to look at. There are all these things called people around, and they have things, and they have clothes, and they have all this great stuff that you could look at. Okay? So very few conversations happen in isolated rooms where there's no other potential distractions for you to enjoy. We're also observing, one of the things, this is anecdotal, but I think the evidence is pretty strong. We're starting to see what I call adult parallel play. Okay, so what does this mean? If you look at the social development of kids, when kids start playing with blocks, for example, when they're very young, they play with blocks by themselves. Eventually, they reach a period where they move next to another kid with blocks and play next to them. It's called parallel play. It's a very healthy developmental step. And then they eventually do the third step, which is they begin to play with each other. That developmental step is really valuable because it's how you transition from non-social to sort of social-esque, right, next to each other, to real social interaction. It's awesome to see, it's very important, etc. But the idea was once you get past that hurdle of parallel play, we don't see it very often anymore. Okay? However, what we're seeing in tweens and teens, tweens, for example, when they have what they call play dates, kids will go over each other's house, and they will each have their own tablet. And they will sit next to each other and play on their tablets. Okay? That's called, in child development, parallel play. In teenagers, it's called scary, right? Like, or dysfunctional or something like something bad is happening if at that age so much of the play is parallel. What it means is they're not practicing all the social stuff you're supposed to practice. As the age of access to technology declines, so we now have in just a 3-year period, we went from the average 12-year-old having a cell phone to the average 10-year-old having a cell phone. An amazing thing, think about that. Think how fast things had to go from the average 12-year-old to the average 10-year-old to get a cell phone. And moving downward, more and more kids have more and more things that they can parallel play with, that can engage them, that can discourage face-to-face interaction and other types of interactions. So, we did a large-scale survey of 3,400 tween girls, ages 8 to 12, nationwide. A sample was selected. It was not a perfect sample. It was from Discovery Girls magazine, which is an extremely popular girls magazine for ages 8 to 12. Income slightly higher than average, not that much higher, surprisingly, and all the other demographics look pretty good. Geographical distribution were good, etc. Now, people ask me, why not boys? Well, first of all, if you've ever met an 8 to 12-year-old boy, emotional development is not something that goes with them, right? It's not like a category that sort of applies to them at 8 to 12. And in fact, I will say one of my favorite stories is I live in a freshman dorm, as I mentioned, and my dorm has all-female first and third floors and all-boy second floor. And in the dorm, the third floor, women decided they were going to get the resident assistant, we have resident assistant on each floor, a gift. And they decided they'd each get a gift for under $5 for Christmas. And they did. And the first floor girls seeing this were aghast that they had done nothing. So they got this enormous card. And each woman on the first floor wrote a lovely note to the RA. And it was really nice. And about 2 weeks later, I'm walking through the second floor. And I pass by the RA's room, and it is filled with trash. Broken, push carts and signs and, this nonsense and junk. You couldn't get in the room. So I saw the RA and said, what happened? She said, that's how boys say I love you. So even at 18, they don't develop, but at least 8 to 12, it's pretty much a lost cause. So girls at least show some variance that we might want to explore. So we did an online survey. So obviously we excluded kids who were offline. But I think nonetheless, the results are pretty interesting. We had controls for age, cell phone ownership, television in the room, and computer in the room. We looked at media use, including multitasking, that multitasking question I showed you. And we also, for one of the first times, it's one of the most striking things I think about media research, there have been virtually no studies that look at media use that also ask about face-to-face time. How much time do you spend face-to-face with people? Now, you might have thought, well, golly, there's so much of it, why would you ask? But it turns out there's very important variance. It turns out incredibly important variance to be had in face-to-face interaction. We also looked at a number of measures of social and emotional development. So these are indexes. I pulled out sample items. Social success, I feel like I have a lot of close friends, other items like that. Normalcy feelings, compared to people my age, I feel normal. Then we also had items for how many friends do you have that your parents think are a bad influence. And then some interesting questions on where do you get your positive feelings from? Where do you get positive feelings, online or in person? Where are your positive emotions found? And then negative feelings. So where do your negative feelings come from? So which in some sense are you more oriented toward? And does that have an effect? And finally, hours of sleep, which is associated with a lot of other positive measures. So what about multitasking? Multitasking is negatively related to, controlling for media use now, feelings of normalcy and amount of sleep, and positively related to media use while face-to-face, friends who are bad influences, and more positive feelings from online. Critical issues here is we're getting, and certainly points in the same direction, a negative direction for social and emotional development. What it suggests is that multitasking impedes social and emotional development, partly because we think, again speculative, that's because it discourages face-to-face really concentrated face-to-face communication. Online media use is negatively related to feelings of normalcy, amount of sleep, more negative feelings from online, and is positively related to multitasking. So one of the ways that people multitask is to do online media. It also encourages media use, or is correlated with media use with face-to-face, friends who have bad influences, and more positive feelings, not surprisingly, from online. Importantly, these negative effects occur even though there's no relationship between online use and face-to-face communication. So the idea that online use and face-to-face communication are traded off is incorrect. And there's other studies that have similar findings to this. And this is why people who look at the results for online get a bit confused. For some people, who we can call hypersocial people, they face-to-face all the time, and as soon as they go home, they start onlining the same people. So the model of them is they just want to be connected totally, but they're using online as a supplement, an extension to their face-to-face use. There's another group who use online and don't have face-to-face. And the results for face-to-face are just striking. These are the most powerful results in the survey. Huge effects, massive effects. Face-to-face communication, self-reported, but face-to-face communication is negatively related to media use while face-to-face. So if you think about that, that really says something. What that says is people who value face-to-face communication don't tend to use media while they're doing it. So kids who face-to-face a lot don't have friends who are bad influences, or at least they report. They don't use media while they're face-to-face, but what do? They face-to-face communication is negative. Oh, gosh. Jeez Louise, I'm sorry. I don't know how that happened. It's negatively related to multitasking. Kids who are into face-to-face communication do not media multitask. But it is related to more positive feelings from face-to-face, more negative feelings from online. They sleep more, which is hugely important in this age group. All forms of media use. So face-to-face kids are not anti-media kids. They are not anti-media. It's not that media, online media, replacing face-to-face. It's just that if they do face-to-face, the argument is they get the practice and experience, they get engaged with the social world, and they develop social success, feelings of normalcy, etc. And they learn to value face-to-face communication. I will say just anecdotally, I should say this research, this research was done with Roy P. and a bunch of grad students, this survey. One of the most remarkable cultural changes is the change in the relative focus on face-to-face communication, not just among teens. When I was young, one of the most common expressions you heard almost anywhere you went was a parent or an adult saying to a child, "Look at me when I talk to you." So those of you who are older are all probably saying, "Yeah, I heard that all the damn time." Okay? Nowadays, I've just been logging as I walk around. You never hear it. Now, why? Part of it is these adults are busy with their cell phones. So in fact, there's a recent Wall Street Journal article arguing that if you look at the accident rates of kids in various age groups, most age groups have rapidly declining, dramatic declines in accident rates. The group from 1 to 4 has an increase. It's not because because the technologies are better. The argument made in the Wall Street Journal is parents are distracted. And if you're looking at your phone, you're texting, you're not watching your kid. And that age group, technology is not the critical determinant of what happens to them, which it is in the older age group. It's monitoring. It's adult and parental monitoring. As you see more and more adults sucked into media, more and more they can say, "Look at me when I talk with you because I don't want to look at you when you talk with me," right? So this change, I think, is an important cultural shift that has a number of effects. Okay, there's some other research linking, so why else would multitasking be affected, negatively associated with these social development, is the cognitive control, executive function and cognitive control is associated with emotional development and skill. So there's other people's research. So as multitasking harms cognitive control, executive function, then that will indirectly affect emotion development. So another thing going on that I think is provocative and important is Facebook. The Facebook phenomena has many elements. But I think one of the most interesting and important and overlooked is that Facebook has now replaced Disneyland as the happiest place on earth. Okay? Why? So first of all, almost every photo on Facebook is happy. Everybody is smiling. And research done at Stanford, not in my lab, James Gross and a couple other folk in psych, has shown teens who constantly use Facebook, think they're much sadder than the average person. Why? Because everybody on Facebook is smiling. Everyone is so darn happy. Number two, the like button. There's recent research showing that people are much more likely to click on the like button if someone writes something happy than something sad. Now, on the one hand, that's logical. It's hard to write, "I'm miserable, like," right? That's like, okay, but there's an important consequence of that, which is the decision of which messages get circulated on your timeline, which messages get circulated, is based on how many times the like button is hit. Which means that now further, negative comments are circulated less. And then finally, some research we've been doing suggests the ratio of positive to negative comments on Facebook, like I'm sad, I'm happy, is remarkably skewed towards the positive and declining. The positive is increasing, negative is declining. And many of the negative comments have qualifiers, like I'm not so happy, but it's really not that bad. Okay. Now, why is that consequential? Because negative emotions are much more complex. So there's this great quote from Tolstoy, all happy families are alike, but every unhappy family is unhappy in a different way, which is a nice summary of not just family dynamics, but human dynamics. Happiness is really simple. Negative emotions are really hard. They require more attention, they require more processing, and they require more control. Yet, kids get much less practice with them. They don't get practice face-to-face because they're not looking at the face. They don't get practice on Facebook or online because there's so little of it online. So they're just not getting practice. So the argument here, and again, this isn't confirmed, this is just an argument I want to make, that, it is absolutely true, negative emotions are much more complex. That's very well established. That the lack of practice, and one of the things we haven't thought about is that emotion management, regulation, observation, takes practice. So one of the things we're doing now is actually using the Yale MSCIT, the Emotional Intelligence Scale out of Yale, to see whether in fact high multitaskers, we think, will show less ability to detect and understand emotion because they don't have practice. Because if you don't practice something, you ain't going to get good at it. And so that's the problem there. So, and especially, it's the negative emotions that are most worrisome. The argument then is that multitasking is taking an emotional toll. Attention is really key to emotion. Again, we haven't thought about that so much because for the most part, there was nothing else to attend to when you were interacting with people than emotion. Negative emotions, I argue, are particularly hard hit, because they require more thinking when we're decreasing the ability we have to think about negative emotions. And also because the environment is becoming negative emotion poor, positive emotion rich. And multitasking also has people develop habits of using media even while face-to-face. So the idea is that the amount of input you get, the amount of attention, the amount of input, the amount of concentration you can put on people's emotional manifestations has been declining. It's important to know face-to-face communication seems to be the magic curative. It seems so positively associated with so many things and does not seem to be solely, it could be, but doesn't seem to be solely a function of kids who are nervous face-to-face. It's just a correlational effect of reverse causality where it's the comfort with face-to-face does it. I think that's part of it, but the fact that they're not retreating to media suggests that it can't be the whole story. It's likely not the whole story, that there's something important about face-to-face communication. Again, that shouldn't be, intuitively we would guess there is important things about face-to-face communication given how much of the human brain is allocated to face-to-face communication. Okay? And online media without face-to-face is taking an emotional toll because the world you're living in is one that's denuded. We're observing, by the way, we've just started looking at Twitter and we're observing the same effect. Very few negative, I am sad comments on Twitter. Okay. Now, so I've already been somewhat speculative. Now I'm going to be even more grossly speculative to finish up. I think there's something really important and powerful going on that's very scary. And I should say, I love technology. I've been designing technology forever. I've studied technology. I work for companies that build technology, et cetera. So to the extent I sound negative on technology, it makes me insanely sad because nobody loves technology more than me. I'm in a communication department. So I love this stuff. But these are going to sound pretty negative, and I fear they are negative. First one is the notion of attention. We're trying to figure out how to measure this as well, has become devalued. I think it used to be one of the things people admired most in others was the ability to really pay attention, certainly in academic circles at the very least, that the person who really remembered stuff, who really sort of thoughtfully did stuff, was admired. And now I think the notion of attention has become devalued. Second of all, related to this is I think classically, when you're trained, you learn about secondary task reaction time. We're talking about measures of secondary tasks. I don't know that there are secondary tasks anymore. Increasingly, when you talk with people about what they're doing a bunch of stuff. So even the driving thing, there's much weakened notion of this is what I'm really doing and this is ancillary. We just don't see that right now. We're seeing less of that. I think that's another important trend as we think about understanding cognition. And especially worrisome for, one would hope that when you're talking with someone, that is the primary task. I would really hope that because I like the idea of people talking with each other. Anecdotally, we're getting a lot of evidence from talking with teachers and other things. Emotion regulation skills have been declining. Kids are much less able to manage regulations at younger ages. We're seeing much higher rates of all sorts of emotion regulation problems in college students. Much, much higher rates. Now, is it multifaceted? Of course it is. I don't think it's all technology. But I think one part of it is the lack of practice in encountering other people's emotions, observing their ways of regulating, etc. I think that could be causing a problem in emotion regulation skills. Plus, the fact that because of multitasking, their cognitive executive function skills are declining. And finally, we're seeing problems with impulse control. Again, this is related to another research, cognitive executive function. And I think it also has to do with the fact that you just don't think as hard about stuff. And even more extreme perhaps is empathy may be declining. Because again, for me to really understand your emotional state, I not only have to understand emotional states in general for me, I have to deeply understand your emotional states. If I'm not deeply observing anybody, let alone you, I can't do it. I'm going to end with a sort of tragic story, tragic for me, not for anyone else. And it was one of the inspirations for some of this research. I live, as I say, in a freshman dorm, and one of the kids in the dorm, I walked by and I said, "So, what are you up to?" And she said, "I'm texting Fred." I said, "Oh, I just passed Fred like a minute ago. He's right over here." And she said, "No, I know that. I'm just going to text him." I said, "That's interesting." I said, "Why don't you just go and see him? He's right here." She said, "It's inefficient." So I said, "Look, I live in a freshman dorm, and efficiency is number 853 in the thing that freshmen care about. Freshmen are the most inefficient. I love them. I love my kids, but they're amazingly, insanely inefficient." So I said, "It can't be inefficiency driving you." So then she said, "Well, yeah, I guess." She said, "Look, you don't really lose anything by texting." So I said, and here's a tragic story. I said, I just got back from my high school reunion, and a woman gave me the love letters I had written her 30 years ago. Don't ever do this, please. Burn them before you give them to someone. It's horrible on so many levels. I cannot even begin to explain it. But nonetheless, being a scientist, I remained calm and studied them. But so I get these love letters. It's just brutal. It was just horrible. But as I read them, I said, it was fascinating because in those days, not only, of course, couldn't you email and Skype and all this, telephone calls, there was a thing called long distance, which meant that it cost a heck of a lot of money to call someone. Okay? So we never called each other. The only medium we had was writing. So we would write these letters, and in the letters I wrote to her, they described how painful it was that I couldn't see her face, hear her voice, all the stuff that you regret 30 years later, but that's okay. But I said, look, these were filled with these. I said, so clearly there was some belief that seeing someone, hearing their voice, had to have value, or we wouldn't have written about it. And she said, "That's really quaint," which is awesome. I mean, it's either terrible or awesome, but it suggests that there may be some change in the notion of what it is to have a connection, to think about emotion as being something that this isn't that big a deal. It's quaint, right? So it's a disturbing thing, but I think there's something interesting and important about the way in which media may be changing our views because of all these different trends to change our views about what it is to have an emotional connection. Okay, so I'll stop there and take questions. Thank you. Yes? Yeah, I'm sorry, the question was, have we thought about the effects of technology on love and increasing divorce rates, et cetera? What we do see, certainly, one thing we have seen in college campuses, for example, is a dramatic growth in non-dating. The amount of dating, that sort of classical, two people get together and do something together, has really declined on college campuses. And we see much more group stuff. And I think it's partly the intensity. I think that kids can't, not kids, college students, but again, other populations as well, can't sustain the intensity. So one day in my dorm, I made a rule. I had the one day, I said, for one day, you're not only not going to use media to communicate, you really have to look at the other person. Just one day, not. And it may be the worst day of your life, but that's okay. You just got to do it for one day. And what was fabulous was the kids coming back with like a lot of kids going, that is exhausting. Like, geez, there's so much stuff. And then another one goes and goes, do you know all the different ways people show emotion? Like their face, their voice, geez. I'll check into that. So I said, well, in fact, there's a field called that, and there's lots of, I wrote a book, and but it's awesome, right? So I think what happens is it's the world of intensity is part of the world. Well, there's two kinds of intensities. There's depth intensity and breadth intensity. I think what high multitaskers do well in one sense, which is they like it, is the breadth intensity. Increasingly new things all the time. That's another thing I should mention. High multitaskers love the new. So on this reward punishment scale, like, do you think new things are going to reward you or punish you? High multitaskers think they're rewarding. Low multitaskers are more skeptical. So I think what you do see is you see this sort of sustained, deep focus thing being very uncomfortable. So to the extent that's what love is about, at least according to the songs and stuff like that in my love letters of 30 years ago, right? Then that's a change. Again, that's another important change. Now, what that change means, we don't know. But we do see in like colleges and high schools, a dramatic growth in group level interactions rather than dating. Not a lessened amount of sexual activity. No, which is interesting, right? So they sort of hang in gangs and then have sex too. But it's a really interesting phenomenon, right? That you don't see a decline in that, but you see this dramatic decline. So I do think there's something powerful going on in that understanding what depth of tie is, very tough, very tough. Yeah.
First of all, now that we've lost all the high multitasking.
Now we can talk about them. Yeah.
I just wondered, and I'm sure you've fielded this question a lot, to what extent do you believe or have evidence that these are causal effects?
Yeah, it's a killer it is the question that keeps me up nights a lot. So what do I think is going on? So I suspect what's going on is some combination of the following. Partly, it's a personality variable. There are people who want to do it. And in fact, I think it's also partly just an availability variable. So I say to the kids in my dorm, look, I'm not claiming I was a virtuous soul who, if I lived in 2012, would be reading a book and ignoring all this other stuff. But we couldn't do it, right? We had one TV in the whole house, and it was usually not controlled by the kid. So, we didn't do who wanted to watch, Fascination or whatever nonsense, right? So we didn't have things in our room. There was one telephone in the house, which was clearly monitored and regulated. So in that environment, none of these other things would have worked, right? I'm not saying I wouldn't have happily sat in the playground and used an iPad. So I think one part of this is we've created a world where the access is unbelievable. Not just access, the ability to multitask is unbelievable. Like, so computer, right? The fact that kids can listen to music 24/7 is unbelievable, right? You can get it out of your computer, your phone, your thing, your this, that. Wow! So I think the number of devices that support the growth of screen size. Right? So as screens get bigger, you can multitask more because there's just more screen real estate, right? So I think a huge part of this is opportunity. So those people who had this inclination go that way. I think another thing going on is a cultural one, which is there is a cultural devaluing, now to what extent it's related to this other stuff, of attention. So people don't value that skill as much. True focus, right? So I think that's another part of it, that we've opened up a cultural, not only a technological playground, a cultural playground. I think that's part of it too. There's a great question which we'd like to study, which is, let's take these scans, let's assume these are right? What happens if you make people stop multitasking? So in principle, that's easy. But I can tell you, I offered $250 to kids in my dorm to stop for a week. They wouldn't do it. And it was fascinating. And what they said was great. I mean, great, is that right? It would destroy my social life. If I literally can't be texting while I'm doing other stuff, my friends are all going to be mad at me, my life is ruined, et cetera. And maybe $250 isn't worth ruining your life. So I don't know. The other thing, of course, is the workplace, right? More and more forces in the workplace doing this, although I've started to talk with workplaces who are scared that they're destroying their workers, right? So they go, I don't want to be in an OSHA situation, right, where I'm destroying the brains of my workforce, so you have some of that. So I think it's a very complicated constellation of things. I don't know. But I do think technology has a role. I think independent individual volitions have a role. I think cultural change has a role. I think they're all conspiring, but I don't know, but it's a tough one. Yeah.
Are you seeing an increase in only media, intimate relationships, with Skype and FaceTime, they've never met before?
What's really interesting, so one of the things we found that shocked everybody was the amount of video chatting is extremely small, given how easy it is, and free, right? Like everything you would expect. And the reason is people want to multitask. So what it turns out is if you're video Skyping, people will notice if you're looking at the keyboard. But if you're not video Skyping, they won't. Now, there are other cues like the long, excruciating pause, et cetera, et cetera. But in fact, that's what the research shows, that we thought that companies, especially maybe not casual, but companies would flock to this, right? Video conferencing, oh my God. In fact, no one does, because they want the opportunity to do other stuff at the same time. So I think that's a large part of it too. The reason, again, it's the point, right? Face-to-face communication is annoying in a lot of respects. It demands attention, and you can know whether I'm looking at you or not. Now, that is annoying to the extent that the value added of me actually knowing your emotions is good. Right? But if I don't think it is, if I can't read your face, why do I care? In some sense, right, it's just a waste of time. If I'm not really paying attention to your voice anyway, why do I care about Skype? So in fact, it's why chat has exploded relative to, you never would have guessed. If you look at the literature, the argument was when phone calls got dirt cheap, they are so much better, right? Just read the literature. Phone calls are so much better than typing that phone calls are going to explode and text is going to die. Absolutely the opposite happened. And why? Because talk requires all this social stuff. I got to actually say hello. How are you? Or maybe not. I got to actually think about, I got to listen to the words you're saying, right? Not just the words, but I got to process the paralinguistic cues. And I can't do 4 at once, right? So that sucks, according to students, right? I can't have 4 conversations. In fact, literally, that's an often answer I get. Well, I can't have 4 conversations at once. I said, you can't have 4 conversations at once. Like I go, yes, but right, not for a technical reason, right, for a totally different reason. And then I said, you can have, then they said, of course I can. Look, type, click, type, glance, type. And I said, okay, that's a really fascinating definition of conversation. Fascinating, right? It's awesome, right? Never would have thought of that. So that's what I think is going on, right? So, but again, it's a cultural definition, right? If we had a culture where we said, no, we're not going to do that, you have to really, so like when kids come into my, into my house for, in the cottage where I live, I say, look, you can't be having your phone out. You can't be texting while you're talking to me. And I won't do it either, and it's fair. So I think that's a large part of it. There's something really deep going on in this issue of what's going on. So yeah, I think challenging. You had a question.
Yeah, I enjoyed your talk very much. If I was to think of, who we would invite if we had a counterpoint or had another podium over there, who the author was who wrote a book called The Mommy Brain, and what it makes me think of is that some people, let's say mommies, are forced to multitask, and even before technology, if they had 4 or 5 kids running around, they're doing a lot of multitasking, and the notion that it's not by choice, but they get good at it.
Well, so it's interesting. So this is why I distinguish media multitasking. This may be I suspect, this is a case where media is different. So for example, some of the literature on task switching ability in the non-media domain, women are better than men. But in the media domain, there's no difference across a number of studies. So I think, it's not clear how we evolved to a world of media. It's clear we evolved to a world of non-media. Right? So it's totally believable that the ability of women, especially in those cultures, especially where there were child raisers, to be able to worry about all this stuff simultaneously. It's not clear you would evolve a media capability that was similar because there would be no media on which to be capable. So I think, I can say the evidence on differences in capacities of managing multiple tasks, et cetera, in media do not show, not just my own work, lots of people's work, don't show any difference. But in the physical domain, you do. So I think that's a difference. I think the people, so in answer to your question, which is a great one, who would be the dude on the other side of the podium? I think it's people who sort of emphasize the idea that the moreness of it all. And I understand that, right? So if any of you have ever written a paper or a book, before and after Google, God, it's so much easier. I mean, it is just unbelievably, I can not even imagine writing. I've never written a book before Google. I wrote papers before Google. I don't even know how you could do it. And the ability to find, you go like, did somebody, unless, so it's not that I don't love this stuff, but I think the confusion is not access per se. Again, not even online per se. It's great to have online. My God, I wouldn't know what I'd do without email either. It's not that. It's the lack of appreciation of the difference between incredible access and multitasking, the difference between online as a supplement and complement to face-to-face rather than a substitute. I think those are the differences. It's not that they're wrong, that, my goodness, a world without the internet would make me sad. A world without TV would make me sad. I'd be really sad about all that. It's just the difference between one where there's incredible amounts of multitasking or not, and one where it's a replacement rather than a complement. I think that would be the alternative. Yeah.
Yeah, please. How much of this do you think is a consequence of the devices themselves becoming more personal, like shared computers and shared cell phones becoming more?
I think absolutely there's no question that the fact that I can do, so we already knew for a long time, kids who have television in their room watch more television. Yeah, it's not going to be a shock, but that's important. But it's important, right? Kids who have computers in their room use computers more, not just for research. Okay. And so the answer is, anytime you increase access to a technology, people use it more. Again, that dynamic of media being seductive. So now, you not only have media that are more personalized, they also can do multiple things at once. In fact, I remember when the first phone came out that could play music and take phone calls, because it was a phone, there's a story about that that's actually quite informative. It said, and when you pick up the phone to answer the phone, it turns off the music. Do you know that was a bug? People protested and said, why the heck can you turn off my music when I have a phone call? I want to listen to my music while I hear the phone call. Okay? And in fact, so that the reference I made to phone is really, I think, important. I was one of the first people to buy an iPhone 3. I love technology. And about 2 weeks after I got the phone didn't work. I couldn't make phone calls. Everything else worked. My calendar worked, my notes worked, but I couldn't make phone calls. So I go into the Apple store and I say, my phone is broken. And he says, looks at it and he goes, oh, we just have to download the updated phone application. And I said, no. Phone is what this is. This is ontologically a phone. calendar is an application, notes are an application. It is a phone. And the guy looks at me and goes, "You're not going to do well with the iPhone 4, are you?" I said, "No, but, so I think that's another thing, right? The notion of everything's an application creates the notion that, sure, I can do anything I want with anything, which creates a sort of invisibility of the device, makes the applications more central, makes me use more applications simultaneously. And so the support of multitasking on these devices, right, is all part of this too. I think you're absolutely, all these technologies afford all this stuff. And then this engine, this fundamental partial displacement of media is the other piece of the engine that just pushes the whole thing. So I think access, you're absolutely right. More access, more personalization, more ability to do multiple things on any device. All of that creates a world in which you can do whatever, all these things at once. It's really important. Yes?
I'm noticing, particularly related to emotional regulation, I'm wondering what you think about the growing emphasis in psychological treatments on mindfulness-based treatment and how that might relate to...
Well, it's interesting. You know, I know Alan Langer well, and done some stuff early on in mindlessness. I don't know the details of mindfulness treatment. I mean, if the issue is better, more aggressive and active use of executive function relative to other things, I think that's absolutely critical. But again, one of the problems is if multitasking is harming those abilities, then we're going to make it harder to be mindful. So one of the things we're doing in the dorm is we're trying this thing where we have these video games that supposedly build up executive control function and the link between executive and... So we're trying to see if that works. So my own take would be, at least in the age groups that I most focus on, college age students and such, it's going to be important to build up executive function before you even try to create mindfulness and such. I do think that part of the spirit of mindfulness is the notion of you really paying attention to what you're doing. So to the extent it values attention, I think that's all. I mean, that's like aces. That's like really awesome. I think that's a fabulous thing. Other question? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, please.
I know you talked a lot about the enhancement of positivity online through Facebook and Twitter, but wouldn't, and this kind of would possibly relate to emotion regulation and empathy of declining, kind of the, I guess, call it from the negative side? You go to any comment section of any YouTube video on any, HuffPost thing, and you're basically going to think that humanity is a bit of horrible people.
Well, right, but they're not sad. They're no. I think it's very important. I think you're absolutely right. So here's what we know about criticism, right? Work done by Amabile and Glazebrook and some stuff even we've done with technology. Criticism makes you seem smarter. Absolutely does. And my favorite example of this is movie critics. Movie critics who like most movies are dumb. Movie critics who hate all movies are really smart. And of course that's ironic, because why would you go into a job where you have to watch things you hate all the time, right? So you got to be stupid, like you volunteer for a job where you hate everything you get. But in fact, it doesn't matter, right? So there's a large body of literature suggesting that negative comments make you seem smart. Now, the other part is that what you get from these comments is people are angry. But again, what does that teach you about emotion control? What it teaches you is uncontrolled emotion. The negative emotions you see are uncontrolled. I agree, they're totally vicious. What you don't see is sort of the very reasoned negative discourse, right? You just don't see that. So you see the only negativity you see on the web is negativity, directed at others, not itself. Not itself. So when nobody writes, "Your article made me feel sad," which is a perfectly coherent comment, right? Or "I'm very sad about this," right? What do they write? They say, "You're an idiot, you missed the point, you da-da-da." So it's critical, but it's not emotional in any interesting way. And it's impulsive. So what you learn is the way to deal with emotion is impulsivity. You write these these negative things. So I think, in fact, that reinforces this trend. And it's not about emotion at all. They're not talking about their emotions. Yeah, you had a question.
Where do you think the line is drawn between like high multitaskers and like attention deficit disorder? Do you think there's like a correlation?
That is a great question. I don't know, is the sad answer. One thing we do want to do is, assuming these brain scans hold up when we run more people, is compare them to the brain scans of people labeled as ADD in that same age group and see whether we get the same brain scans. That's number one. Number two, I do think this term attention deficit may be problematic and confusing because, again, I don't know, and this is something I've actually just started to look at, so I don't know. To what extent is attention deficit disorder defined as a person who doesn't pay attention to what society thinks they should pay attention to? And to what extent is it you literally can't attend to anything? So for example, if I'm talking to you and I'm looking over here and looking over here and looking over here, I may be attending to something. So I don't know, I total ignorance here. To what extent is the deficit one of not looking where you should look, like, seeing, but are you seeing the monkey, right? So that's a different kind of, so I don't know which deficit is the attention. Of course, one of the problems is, we were just talking about this earlier, I don't know how to count attentional units, or what is one attentional thingamajig, and how do I know that, right? But I think that's hugely important because conceptually there's got to be something radically different between you have 10 attentional units and I have 10, but I put them where I'm supposed to, and you put them where you're not supposed to, which is a totally different thing than I got 10 and you got 6. So I don't know. Like, again, my knowledge of fMRI is extremely limited, but the fact that they're lighting up parts of the brain that don't seem to make any sense, but they're lighting up parts of the brain, right? They're not ignoring, right? They're not like saying, oh, I don't care. So that's really what's so complicated. We just don't have good accounts for a more complex notion of attention other than the notion of, you be looking at me right now, don't be looking over there, right? But what if you're looking over there and seeing something really cool that's making you happy? Is that a deficit? Right? It makes me feel like a deficit. So no, but that's part of this issue. So that's one of my worries, and I don't know that, and again, total ignorance, what the account of attentional deficit disorder is. Is it really literally less units of attentional stuff? Or is it you just don't put it where you should? And then the issue is, do you want to and can't? Do you not want to? Those seem totally different, right? And that's what, I don't know. So that was a long way to answer. I have no idea. Yeah.
So what personality traits are correlated in multitasking, things like assertiveness, independence, and so forth? Can you predict who's going to be a multitasker?
Well, no, by the time it's a great question. We have correlates of, as I say, we have correlates of much more reward orientation than punishment orientation. We have correlates of conscientiousness. We have correlates of liking, not surprisingly, multiple things. Less breadth and more depth less depth, more breadth orientation. But predicting is hard because we don't know what age to do it. So it's a great question. Again, you'd sort of hope there'd be something, like a gene, part of the brain, or something, but we don't know. Where, I should say this, one of the problems here is research is 2 years old. I mean, we stumbled upon this thing in 2010, this idea of chronic. Nobody bothered to look at chronic multitasking until 2010 when we did it. So we're early days. And again, people are doing more stuff. They're studying other things. There was just a study of breadth versus top-down versus bottom-up thinking. And high multitaskers are really bad at top-down thinking. So that's another one. That's not a personality. It's cognitive variable I should have included. It's just some recent research. So this is all really complicated, but it's early days. But obviously we have the problem is it's happened so fast. I mean, I live in the world of media, company and academic. nobody thought this stuff would happen as fast as it did. And I even like guys at companies who like should know better. So this stuff has happened much faster than we're ready to cope with it. So I feel like I'm running not just me, I mean, all the people get involved, we're racing against time in a sense, right? As younger and younger kids start getting, so the number of, I love in a complicated sense, the pictures of like babies with iPads. It's like really like, wow. And they love them. There's no doubt they love them. That's not the issue. And so what does that mean? Like what does that mean that we're giving younger and younger kids, schools are giving 5-year-olds, like what does all that mean? And especially for social development. Because like when arguing, I apologize, I forget who it was, but someone was talking about, a school board giving 5-year-olds iPads, right? And one of the problems with that is media is an awesome escape. Media is just like so great as an escape. But there's something healthy about not always being able to escape. One of my favorite examples of that is my son loved Legos. And there was this software called Legos. You could click the blocks. And I said, Matthew, I know you love Legos, but whatever is important about Legos isn't about building things. It's like all this other stuff. And he said, well, it's so frustrating, you have to, like, one doesn't come out right and stuff, and you got to pull on it. And, it's really annoying with clicking. You can just, you know what? I agree with you. And I said, you're not going to appreciate this, but learning to deal with frustration is really a good thing. I said, I know frustration sucks, and I know at 5, frustration sucks even more. But that practice, again, it's all practice, right? It's like the practice of dealing with frustration is going to serve you infinitely better than whatever the hell Legos thing you build. And I think that's part of the issue, right? So it's all this, you don't want to have I love media, and media as a way out is awesome. But if media is always the easy way out, it's the same thing with face-to-face. Face-to-face is a lot of work. So when I talk with my students in the dorm, I agreed with them. I didn't say to them, face-to-face is easy. Not at all. But it's worth it, right? Like that's got to be the argument. But if you don't believe it's worth it, just as my son didn't believe fighting with Legos was worth it, then of course you're not going to do it. But then you're not going to develop. You're not going to I don't know where you get those developmental steps. And so I think that's a really, part of this worry is if you create escapes, which media is awesome at, people will take them. Because people are lazy, like me too, right? Person. We're incredibly lazy. There's this great quote Thomas Edison had hanging on his wall. This great quote from the 1600s. Sir Joshua Reynolds, who said, "There is no expedient to which man will not resort to avoid the real labor of thinking." And I think it's exactly right? Whenever you really don't have to think, most of us are even professors, right? Most of the time, would love not to think so hard, right? Like just because it's a lot of work, right? And I think it's the same thing. So if you transplant that with the real labor of emotional thinking, yeah, heck, I would gladly do that in the short, right? Long run cost, short run payoff, and of course we're short run. So I think that's what's going on. I think it's really an issue of that. Please. Thank you.